Welcome to the Bearded Finisher Podcast, your one-stop show for all things finishing and coatings. Your host, Zach, and a variety of industry experts will guide you through the art of perfecting your finishing and business game. From seasoned pros to fresh faces, get ready for tips, tricks, and trends to elevate your knowledge and business to the next level.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Bearded Finisher Podcast. Today's episode, we have got Mr. Robert Chickey with VeroMetal. What's going on, Robert?
Not much, Zach. Really pleased to be here. Excited to talk with you about VeroMetal and other things.
I didn't butcher your last name too bad, did I?
You did not. That is exactly how it sounds. Yep.
Excellent. Well, let's jump into it. Let's just kick off the episode. Let's hear your backstory, Robert. Tell us how you got into the coatings industry, and then how you got involved at Vero and how Vero came about.
Okay, so I have been in the coatings game for over 30 years.
Wow.
And I actually started out as a painting contractor back. The first company I started was actually in 1989, so way long ago. And I had a partner, and that didn't work out so well, so it didn't last long.
I don't think many of them do.
And really, for me, the lesson learned there was you can't have two people that do the same thing. You have to have two people that have separate skill sets that can play nice together. But if you both have a similar skill set, it doesn't work. At least it didn't work for me.
That's a very good point.
You know, all through journey, to get better at anything is learning and failing. If you're not willing to fail, you're not going to grow, period. So I started my second company in 1991, and we started out as painters, painting contractors. We did mostly paint, but back in the 90s, at least in Minnesota where I'm based, everything was white. And I mean, the entire house, walls, woodwork, ceiling, were all the same color. I mean, to this day, I hate white kitchens. I mean, it's just, I painted so many white kitchens. We used to box our paint. We'd go to the hardware store and get a plastic 55-gallon trash can and just pour it all in that and pour it off. It was nuts. And I was like, you know, I don't know that I can do this for a career. I mean, I was not challenged. So about 5 years in, I transitioned to wood finishes. I didn't like the way they looked. Putting stain on wood never made any sense to me. Why would you put stain on wood? And I understand that that was the path, the common path and all that. But I worked at an elite level, and so I was exposed to a lot of clients that had fine antiques. And so I really would look at the antiques, and you could see the wood. But the path for getting wood to look like that was not possible with what was in the marketplace. So I pretty much disregarded what was in the marketplace and went kind of down the rabbit hole. And one of the things that I explored on was I read this book in the early 90s by this gentleman called George Frank. And it's called Adventures in Wood Finishing, Adventures in Wood Finishing was this book he wrote. And it really talked about reactive color. And reactive color is essentially minerals and organic materials. It could be like tree bark. It could be nuts, seeds. Anyway, so you mix them in water and it reacts with the tannin in the wood. And it literally shifts the color, but it's not on the wood, it's in the wood.
Yeah, you're changing the molecular structure of the wood at that point.
Exactly, but the clarity it's insane. And then this was pre-internet. There was really no books here. So I started scouring old bookstores all over everywhere to try and find books that had knowledge in them. And so I would learn things that they would use. And some of the stuff, was super toxic and you couldn't use it anymore. So anyway, I kind of honed my craft over that, and then I got into shellac. And shellac in the store is, it's technically shellac because it says it's shellac, but it's modified.
Yeah. It's not the true shellac of the old days.
Yeah, I built a crew of just incredible craftspeople, and we hand brushed houses. We did not spray. And so let me show you that when you brush shellac, that is really an elite skill set that just doesn't exist today. So I was able to make a lot of colors. And so when I had that business, at least in the Midwest where we mostly worked, you would find a house from, say, the mid-1800s that had intact millwork, and an architect or designer wanted to add on to the house. And they would go to the client and say, you can't match that. We have to have a new narrative, so we have to find something that's going to blend or work with it. And I can tell you that is a false narrative, because I can go in a room that's 300 years old if I have to and fix a board, and you would never find it because I don't use conventional products. So I learned all this skill set and we traveled all around the country, and I was speaking nationally about historically accurate coatings because it matters. And it's not modern coatings. Anyway, so we did that for, 15 years or so around the United States. And then in 2010, I got hurt really bad. Not at work, but at home. Broke my leg really bad and didn't walk into my office for 11 months. Literally went home, broke my leg, didn't walk in my office for 11 months, and I was on crutches when I went back.
Goodness gracious.
So my company just didn't survive for 11 months without me. We had probably had 6 months booked, but still, as you say, there's a business side to a business.
Yes.
And I wasn't there. So in 2012, I shut my company down. I just couldn't survive. I tried, but if I was a painting contractor and I turned a house on in 30 days, if I was in that space, I would have survived. But I didn't work in that space. I worked in houses where I was in a house for a year. And I would bid a house and not touch it for a year. So there was an 11-month lag that I just couldn't survive. So I shut my company down. I was in a dark space, let's just say that. My whole 22 years of work just evaporated. It was gone. So now I got to figure out what I'm going to do, because I had a business skill set, but it doesn't really translate. That wasn't my passion. And I tried to work for other companies. The hard part was that, when you have an elite skill set and you provide an elite finish, it's pretty hard. It was for me anyway, to lessen that path. So I would work with companies. I would just say to them, look, you have to be willing to bring your whatever up some so I can tolerate this, because I have to earn a living. And at the time, I still wasn't physically in a good shape. I probably didn't walk properly for 5 years.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it was bad. I tell people this story and they just cringe, so sorry, but my dog knocked me over in a freak accident, and I drove my kneecap on my right leg into my tibia and split it like a log. It didn't break across. It split down. And it took 4 surgeries to put my leg to get it to heal. I almost lost my leg because it wouldn't heal. They put metal in my body, and my body apparently doesn't care for metal. And, I'm one of those rare people that metal doesn't work. So it was, again, a dark thing. But, I will say this is life happens to everybody. And it's really about how you respond. And I will say also that I was definitely in a dark space where I was playing the victim at that time. But after a while, it just became not tenable. And so I just stood up and I had to figure out what to do. And I almost got out of the business. I really did, because I didn't, when you're out of the game for 5 years or so, when you're playing an elite level, 5 years is a lifetime. And I didn't really think that I had a seat at the table still with a 5-year gap, essentially. But what I learned was that I still had a seat at the table because the finishes that I produced, people couldn't figure out what I did then, and they can't figure out what I do now. So I decided to go into consulting and really started my company called Bespoke Finish. That's actually my company. I represent VeroMetal in North America, but my company is Bespoke Finish. And the premise of that was that I know I have the skill set to make whatever color on a piece of wood. And most of the time in the wood finishing space, regardless of what wood products industry you're in, they give you a little sticker on the back of that thing and says, this is what your wood could look like, but it's wood. And so we have no control over this. So, it might look like this, but give me your money anyway.
That's so true.
I developed this methodology where I'm in charge. So I can make wood do whatever I want because I had all that knowledge that was in the reactive color game long before it was in a can. And with modern coatings. And so I have just this unique ability, I guess, to go back and forth between these two worlds and actually have a mixture of art and science. And that's kind of my tagline for Bespoke Finishes. It's a mixture of art and science. And so I can make wood do what I want. But the difference here is you see it. You're not hiding it. The clarity, when I take wood projects today, which is not very often because I'm focused on VeroMetal, but I say to my clients two things. If you go down this road, you can't unsee this. This is different.
That's good.
And this is your bar, and I swear it's going to kind of screw you up. It's going to ruin you forever.
Yeah.
Because you're going to see wood differently. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to teach you. And I said the other thing that's going to happen is your clients, because, I'm not inexpensive for what I bring to the table because it is just rare. And I know my value in the market. So if you're going to engage me, you're kind of ruined forever in a good way.
Yeah.
In a good way. But that your friends and colleagues who also have the resources to hire someone like me are going to come to your house and they're going to be angry because they spent all this tons of money and their house doesn't look like this. And this is something I've seen over and over. 50 times, 100 times. And so anyway, I was always sourcing materials from around the world for my bespoke side. I will use modern coatings, but I will never use conventional stain. I never used it when I was a contractor, and I don't use it now. Microlith pigments, dude, you go down to microlith pigment land, you can do anything.
Yeah, the microlith pigments, it's a rabbit hole. Like it's an industry in itself.
It really is. And I was having a conversation with a bunch of the Italian companies because primarily they're the ones that sell them. They call them stains, but they're not. They're stain because they have a pigment. But microlith pigments or micronized pigments or however they want to classify it, act like dye. but are actually pigments, so they have some color fastness, which is really, really important. Plus, they come in glycol, which, as you're aware, can be mixed with water or alcohol or even acetone. They'll go into it. So if you go down this path, you as a practitioner or a business, you're in control, not a company who makes a decision for you about what's going to be in that can. You have no idea what's in that can. And so when I teach companies and teach people that come into my sphere, I guess, I can show you how to be in control of your path. And you can be able to control at whatever outcome you want and have complete clarity and have the same color from one side of the room to the next within 5% max, regardless if there's multiple species of wood. It doesn't matter. You can't have those outcomes with modern stuff, period, no way. Anyway, so I digress. So as part of my knowing where to look for materials, because I was sourcing from just as far and wide as you can even imagine, things that would work on my bespoke side. And so I knew about Luminor. Luminor was the first liquid metal that hit the market. And I came across Luminor probably in, I think, 1992. So a long time ago. Yeah, that long ago. So Luminor was, the guy that created Luminor was this guy named Tom Valente, and he was the first one that, figured out how to make this a product segment, so to speak. The problem with it was that it was a polyester binder and it hadn't really been formulated well. So it had, polyester doesn't have a high shelf life, long shelf life most of the time. And so this stuff would maybe last 3 months on a good day in a refrigerator. If you refrigerated it, it would last 3 months. And you couldn't polish it to a mirror. And so that was the bar for me. So I can deal with the pot life. You can learn how to, put that in your number, so to speak. But because I can't polish it to a mirror, then it's metal-like. So I really didn't, and that was just my bar because.
So was it not polishable because of the polyester? I mean, typically polyester you can get fairly glossy, or it's just the way he was grinding it.
It was just the way the metal. So again, I learned a lot of this. Why? Based on my knowledge with VeroMetal. And really what it came down to was the metal. The size of the metal particle wasn't conducive to getting a consistent high polish. You could we'll get into that in a minute, but so I kind of just let it go. And I'd seen some other products along the way, but they didn't really have good systems. They were art projects, and so people show you lots of cool shit, and they're like, pardon me, but they show you lots of things that look good on social media, but they don't really. The backstory is not pretty. Let's put it that way.
You see the end result. You don't see how they make that sausage.
Right. And so, again, for me, at this stage of my career, which, I'm going to be 65 in this summer, this June, and I don't have a long time in my working life that I want to be engaged at this pace. So when I took on VeroMetal, so I came across it in 2019, and I reached out to them for information. It's two guys, Frank and Robert, and they're in the Netherlands, who own VeroMetal. And I reached out to them and inquired about it and asked questions that someone with knowledge would. And that apparently intrigued them. So they responded of, can we call you? It's like, hey, you're 7 hours away from me, time zone wise. Sure, we can have a conversation. Because one thing I've learned in life, take meetings. You never know. You never know. Even if it's like makes zero sense to you, there are no coincidences in life. Opportunities show up, and it's whether or not you're open enough or willing enough to step forward and say, okay, I'll take that meeting. Because, I mean, yeah, it's just a meeting. It's an hour. It's a half an hour out of your day. It could take you in a whole different path that you may not expose to. So it's really worth it. Get up and take it. Anyway, so we had a meeting on the phone, and they said to me, we looked at your background. Would you be willing to be our trainer for VeroMetal? And I was like, I haven't even touched your product. I haven't seen your product. I've seen pictures of it and some specs. But I said, send me samples. I want to see what the capabilities are here before I commit to this path. So they sent me a box of samples. I'll never forget this. I was at my house, and at the time, I wasn't married yet. It was my girlfriend's house. It's my wife now, but I was at her house, and the box came, and I opened the box, and I saw the samples, and I saw the mirror polish. And I looked up here, and I said, this is it. This is the one. This has it. And I'm going to run with it, and I am going to get control of North America. Now, that's a crazy statement. I acknowledge that. But the thing is, and I learned later through them is that the reason they asked for a trainer is that there was apparently two other people that took on this product in 2016, and then I guess in 2018 or something like that timeline, and then didn't get any traction because they don't play in this space. They didn't have contacts. I'd already worked at an elite level all over North America, so I had contacts with architects and designers. I'm not going to get stopped by the receptionist coming in the door. I'm going to have a pass right in. It's like I go in and say, hey, look at this cool stuff I'm playing with now. And they're like, cool, man. Hey, show me. So
you get up to that level on the elite side. It is a very, very small family when you're at that level.
No question about it. And it's interesting too. And so what I say to the people that come in, our community, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but when you're in really rare air, elitist of elite land, architects and designers have a team that they rely on. And even if you come in and you're like the greatest thing since sliced bread, you're not getting in because they can't risk it. They won't risk their reputation. So there's really only a few ways in to that level. A, somebody dies. As brutal as that sounds, true, that somebody dies and there's a space. Somebody makes an egregious mistake, and it's not usually with coatings. It's usually you are sleeping with a client kind of mistake. Or you have a product and skill set that they need that doesn't exist in that space. And that is it. And so for those that come into our community with VeroMetal, and so I'll finish my point here, but so that kind of space really is, as you say, rare, but it opens a lot of doors. And so when I decided to become their trainer, one of the partners who's the technical side, his name is Robert Beckers. He came in to Minnesota in September of 2019, and we did a training where they trained me and they trained two others that came along that I called to come fill out a class. We had three, but one of them couldn't make it, but that's a different story. So anyway, so we had a nice conversation about my girlfriend, fiance, whatever, and wife. And then we were getting married the next month. And then I worked kind of as their agent to kind of build brand. But then COVID happened. So, it's kind of like,
let's get some traction, and then you just get kicked in the huevos.
Oh, I mean, it was like, I think I did a training so we did one in St. Paul, Minnesota in 2019, and the next one was November. We did that at ZK Painting. He was in Rhode Island at the time. And then we went to New York. And then after that, I did a private training at a incredible company in Northampton, Massachusetts called VCA, but now they're Metrica. And those guys are they play in the stratosphere elite land too, which is, it's just great to work at that. Anyway, COVID happens, and, you just have to find a way to persevere because it has to grow. You have to adapt. And this is the thing is like, life's going to hit you in the face, especially when you're trying to take on a continent. And so really my path was, I'll be the agent, we'll garner some interest. And then eventually in December of 2020, we got to the point where it's either I get it all or I'm not going forward. So you either give me the entire continent or I'm stepping off the bus, period.
I mean, sometimes you got to go out on those limbs to show them the commitment, but also, I mean, if you're going to spend the money and the time to grow that business, you don't want someone to come in.
Absolutely. That was the point. I was like, look, I've done this for a year, and not really made anything. I mean, I've made money, but I just rolled it back in as you have to grow. And I said, I have made some traction. Why would I allow you to bring someone else in after I've spent a year and a half and burned all this money? It's like, no, either give it to me or pound sand. So they gave it to me. And then, it's been a dance ever since. But the thing is that what pieces are required for growth here, really? So you need applicators. That's a fact. And so they have to be skilled because this is my reputation on the line as well. And you need companies, OEMs, that are going to integrate your material into their end product. That's a piece. And so how can you do that in a relatively short timeline? Because again, I'm not 45. If I was 45, I'd have a long runway and I would do this differently. So one of the things that I decided was that I spent pretty much all of 2020 talking with architects and designers, did some trainings, but very little. Was really about the verbiage to getting it spec'd. So once you get spec'd,
God, it's so hard to get spec'd. Once you get spec'd, it's over.
Right. So I got it spec'd. And so as part of the spec...
That's impressive.
Oh, man, dude. But I had connections. That's the thing. I had a reputation, and that was one of the reasons why. But, and I also, when I was a contractor, knew that to grow, I would have to learn the language that an architect and designer speaks. Because from my perspective, if I'm using terms that resonate with them, even though I'm not an architect or I'm not a designer, if I'm speaking the language and terms, we're equal. I am not a sub. I am your industry partner. And it really matters. And I teach a lot of people that learn the language. You're not a sub. You're not this lowly finisher. You are their colleague because you solve an issue for them. but they look at you and talk to you differently when you took the time to educate yourself as they did. So so we got spec'd, and as part of the specification, it says what the product is, but that you have to engage or use a certified application specialist, period. So then I went about building a certified application specialist.
Then you got to build a program.
Right. Well,
the training.
It's a long road, man, but you have to do it right to grow. I mean, business is business. And I have I have both sides of that coin. So I know that to have a viable business, I have to have all these pieces. And it's not quick, because it's not like I'm selling a different kind of TV. I'm basically going to a company and saying, you know what radio is? Here's 4K TV.
I mean, you're essentially in that realm. You are creating an industry on its own. Yes, it falls under the coatings realm, but it's a segment that is no man's land. I mean, it's completely undefined.
Absolutely.
So you're
totally
scratch. I mean, that makes perfect sense.
So once I got it spec'd from a few architects, I mean, that was a huge accomplishment in literally through COVID, mind you.
That had to make you feel like, all right, this shit's gonna. I
knew that I had a path, and my industry partners were not really super patient, but and we've had lots of discussions then and since, but to scale, there's a path, and all these pieces matter. OEMs, you need those. You need applicators, you need designers and architects, but you have to be spec'd on commercial projects. And so then you engage social media, because that matters. And honestly, I don't really understand Instagram. I've been able to get a following because I share knowledge, and I share high level knowledge. But it's important to do that. So we built out the certified application specialist module, training module, and have changed it as we've grown to adapt as you learn. And then we've kind of built this community. And so the community aspects is super important to me, because when I was a young finisher, there really wasn't a place you could go to get knowledge.
No.
Because, going to your salesman, and I know that you sold stuff, and I sold stuff too, but let me just say that
it's a different world, I will say.
People have an agenda. They have an agenda, and they have a script that they get from their company, and this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, until they go and sell something else. And most finishers don't understand what they're playing with, other than a very basic level. And that is the problem. And so when it goes wrong, and it always does, they have no idea what to do.
No, it's 100 phone calls. I was on that side. It's just nothing but phone calls.
You're just like, God, what the hell? Why do you even play in this space? So we created this community as part of VeroMetal, and it was like this. Your entrance into this community is through training, and whether it's through VeroMetal training or when I start teaching color classes, bespoke finish training, your entrance to come in is through this. And is there a cost? Yes. But here's the piece for me. If you are willing to invest in yourself, that is a gauge for me to say, you are worthy of my time. I will invest in you. And there's lots of people that come into my community that are really talented, but don't understand business as we talk about. And they don't, they're not, artists are different. The way that you see the world, the way that you engage the world. And so it's a struggle sometimes, really. You get down on yourself and you get in a negative headspace. And so it's, these people come into my community and it's like, I have this life experience because I want all the you're experiencing. And so if you allow me to mentor you, I will, because you invested in you and I'm investing in you now.
I mean, that investment level shows a seriousness about their career and their profession. They're taking it seriously. They're investing in their education. They're not just expecting free pizza at a paint store.
No, and there's lots of different levels of coatings out there, and they all have a place in the market. They absolutely do. And so I don't, badmouth any of that because that's a space that people have. But if you want to come play in my space, you better come with game or want to have game.
If you've got the passion and you're not really there, but you're willing to invest in yourself, I mean, you can teach. It's a skill set that's teachable. It's not 100% like you just have to have it. I mean, anything about finishing can be taught.
I totally agree with you.
The color gets a little gray when it comes to, in my opinion, men and our vision of color versus what some people have. That takes a lot more knowledge.
Women see color better than men. They absolutely do. And I will say this too, is that one thing I've learned over the 3 decades I've been in this game is that the most important skill set in finishing, and it's not even close, it's color skill. When you can solve problems, color, I mean, I'm not even talking my skill set, which I know is way out there, just above average color skill. You can go to a company and say, I want X, not, I'm taking this. Every company wants them, the color guys and gals. And they're like, you have this skill set. No, but you're filling a need. But if you have color knowledge, if you understand color theory, if you can see color, then you can be taught a system.
It's mind-blowing. I mean, from my side, from being on the manufacturer side, it was just going into the distributors and talking to them, and the amount of unskilled labor in paint stores that are industrial, but they don't understand color theory. And if it's not read on a spectro, they can't match a color by eye anymore. Like, that is a dying art. If you can find one of those people, you can change. I mean, you can basically write your ticket. But so let's dive into, like, Vero, kind of explain how it works and what the typical applications that people are going to use Vero for those guys out there that don't really know what VeroMetal is yet.
Okay, so VeroMetal, obviously liquid metal, and we have 2 binder systems. One is a pre-accelerated polyester, and the other one is a bicomponent urethane, waterborne urethane. And so inside both those solvent groups, there's a spray version and a trowel or pour version. And as we've alluded to, polyester, for the most part, doesn't have a long shelf life. But this binder and both our binders are formulated. They'll never change. They're not off the shelf, which is a big deal. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, because those things change at will, and they will never tell you or even own it that they did it. So our solvent-borne pre-accelerated polyester has a guaranteed 9-month shelf life.
When you say pre-charged, is that cobalt pre-charged or?
Yes, the cobalt's in there. So all you're doing is adding MAKP, because again, very few people play in polyester land.
Yeah.
And I tell the story all the time. It's like, yeah, polyester, very basic coating in its sense. But Cobalt and MEKP, they touch, it's a bomb. It's a bad day. Somebody's getting hurt.
Yes.
So you really have to have game and be paying attention when you're playing with it.
I used to bring it in through my local paint store, and I brought it in from Circa because they had a polyester, but the cobalt was separate, so it's 3-component. So when I would order it and they would bring it in, and they'd be like, "It's all sitting in a box waiting on you to pick it up," and I'm like, "All right, that little blue tube, put it on the other side of the building.
No doubt, man.
Don't leave it sitting next to the rest of it. Get it away." And they're like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, "Oh, geez, just put it on the other side of the building and I'll go over there."
I hear you. So it's pre-accelerated, and then the waterborne is a bicomponent, so it'll dry without the activator added. And the only reason we ever add the activator is if you want to polish above 5,000 grit.
Yeah, just gives you that surface hardness.
Right. But other than that, if you don't use it, you don't have a pot life, which is a big deal. So VeroMetal is a binder and metal powder. And one of the huge differences between us and pretty much everyone else in this space is the size of the particles of metal powder. Almost everybody uses 325 mesh or bigger. Some of them use 250, which is, it looks like dust. But if your finishes are pretty much just sanded and not polished, where you're sanded and then you're just going to put patina on, you can play in that space. You're not going to have an issue. But if you actually have to polish, which means it starts at 1,000 grit, which is when you're technically polishing and above, and you are at 325 mesh, you're going to get ghost voids. Because it's kind of like this. Let's say
you can't get it flat enough.
Well, even though it looks like dust, the particle size is all the same. So let's say you stick a bunch of golf balls in a cup. There's voids around those edges. And so you notice them when you start polishing. You start getting these ghost lines or spots, and you can't polish them out. They will not come out. And then you burn through and you're starting over. And that's a bad day for everybody because it's an expensive.
My first experience with, we'll say competitor X, so we won't mention them, but yeah, it was until I didn't realize the particle sizes were different until I got some Vero, and I was like, because I was trying to polish the other one for what a customer was looking for, and I could not get past those voids, and I burned through, and then I put it on again, and I'm like, I got to be doing something wrong. And then I ordered Vero, and I went, oh, no, I'm not doing anything wrong.
Right. So, as I say, for me to have always played at an elevated skill set and elevated market, as I said, they all have a room somewhere, but if I'm going to put my name and my brand behind VeroMetal, it has to be the absolute best of the best, or I'm not interested. And so, again, like I looked at some nickel silver, a drum to nickel silver that we got in a few weeks ago, and it was 325 mesh was 20%. The rest was pan, and then it had 200 and some 195. And so we just don't have that issue. And so it is, marketing is supply and demand. And so when you're buying a product that is, has a not really a high demand, most of the metal powder that we play with really goes to the electronics industry because it needs to be a much finer, more controllable thing. So it just comes with a higher cost. I have no idea really what our competitors charge. I have no idea, or care really. It's really about, we have a system and we have a big enough community so that if you spec it on your project, we have somebody nearby you. But there's still project as awareness of VeroMetal becomes more prevalent in the market, and you can definitely see it now because our phone is ringing off the hook, which is fantastic. But it's been a grind to get here. Taking on a continent is not a small task, I will tell you that.
What is up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of The Bearded Finisher. We covered a lot of ground, and I really hope you guys are enjoying the show as much as I am making it. I'm having a blast. But I wanted to let you know this episode had so much that we couldn't fit it all into just a single one. So we've got a special part 2 dropping this Wednesday. Make sure you stay tuned. Keep an eye out for it because trust me, you don't want to miss the rest of the conversation. It is awesome. Again, thank you for listening. I greatly appreciate all the support. See everybody on Wednesday for part 2 and hope you're having a good one.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Bearded Finisher Podcast. We thank everyone for joining. Keep hustling, keep learning, and never settle for anything less than your best. Remember, the path to perfection is a journey, not a destination. Until next time.